fact, I have nothing particularly, I have no issue with welfare in particular. Indeed, you are right to say that some people fall through the social net rightly or wrongly, and sometimes it's indeed the responsibility and burden of the government to rescue them if needed. However, I was really stating the point that we should not go into levels of welfare where we are not confident that we will help the person. But since my counterpart has agreed with me on the fact of prudence, and I agree with him completely that we should be assisting people who fall through the social net, even if it's a matter of government policies failing. If the government policy fails and someone falls through the social net, we take responsibility for it and we exercise it in a manner of the principle of both of us and the people to agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of State. Are there any other points of clarifications? I will accept one from the government backbench. Seeing that there are none, Shadow Minister of Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to urge the government to remember that the opposition most certainly has not forgotten the fundamentals of prudence and pragmatism. Here's my honest appraisal of the number crunching being done. $4 billion deficit, as stated by your Minister of Finance, has been spent on, is going to be the result of this budget, and there are still many questionable policies in the budget. Personally, as the Minister of Defence, I find that the budget for defence can be, in terms of defence expenditure, can be reduced and be directed to some of the welfare that is stated, and that this is pragmatic. Why? Because as my fellow colleagues have stated, it's good for the country, and it's not just about dollars and cents. We would like to remind the government that that's why we're here. There's still a $4 billion surplus, which is a very big deficit. There are a lot of controversial, debatable policies left to be done. And thus, it's the opposition job to come up with better alternative policies, such that the money used is better. The money is better used, or in fact, less money is used. This is the fundamentals of democracy, and therefore, we would like to urge that the bill will not be passed immediately, but be further debated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, my fellow members of Parliament. I thank the Shadow Minister for Defence for agreeing with me on this principle. Indeed, there is room for us to negotiate and parley over how we shall adjust our policy to meet our collective needs. However, from the government standpoint, our policy is this. When it comes to defence, the reason why we have not cut our defence budget more than we think we should have, and allocated more of it to finance is simply because defence is not something that you raise overnight. While it's understandable that we should see the world in peaceful terms, and after all, ASEAN is booming, the region is quite stable, there's a secure balance of power in the region. However, we have to understand that if we were simply to cut back on defence expenditures or not maintain a certain minimum, in a future crisis, we can't say when the crisis will come. A military defence is a long-term investment. We invest in it for a long period. We hope that we don't have to use it, but when it comes down to it, we will have to support it and necessary fund. However, this we could obviously continue our discussion. I thank my counterpart for agreeing with me.
Thank you, Minister of Finance. The last speaker is with the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as the last speaker, allow me to take this opportunity to make a summary of all the areas of concerns that have been made by the opposition bench as well as the independents. Basically, the opposition themselves agree with the principles of the supply bill, but they do question the opportunities in which that we are giving, and whether or not those are opportunities that are helping MNCs or whether or not they are helping SMEs. On this issue, it is on first principle that I need to remind them that as far as possible, that if we can help the SMEs, we will help the SMEs, and we are willing to welcome ideas from the opposition bench as well. And it is on this principle that I also need to remind the opposition that we are not helping MNCs for the sake of helping MNCs, because the help that we give to MNCs allow them to extend jobs, good quality jobs that Singaporeans need. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to remind the opposition of the policies that we have in place in this supply bill to help SMEs. Firstly, the long-term investment that we have made in increasing productivity and wages would help to drive up local consumption. Furthermore, the decrease in the GST will also be a measure in which that we give us stimulus to our local consumption. If we were to stimulate our local consumption, and the local consumption would translate into demand for local goods, which would tend to favor local companies produced by SMEs. And in addition to that, we'll also be collaborating with our universities to institutionalize an SME lab. And this is to formalize the current consultancy efforts extended by the National University of Singapore, and we are looking at further collaborations with the other universities in place as well. On the second issue in which the opposition, as well as an independent member, has raised issue with, was the mechanism in which we disburse aid. On this issue, there is a first fundamental question that I need to ask the opposition, which is whether or not self-help groups exist because of social engineering, or is it because they exist and they continue to exist because of the fact that they are effective in helping out the people in our country. While the opposition lobbies for freedom of speech and assembly, they are suggesting for more bureaucracy to regulate how the community organizes itself. This government believes in the capacity of the society to help those who are left behind and would like to devolve power to them. The opposition is advocating liberalization of their own party and not for the consideration of the Singaporean context.
Thank you, Mr. Finance. Any member wishing to make a clarification? The opposition backbencher on the third row, the furthest from me. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm the Member of Parliament for Marine Parade. Now, I would like to ask the Minister of Finance that basically from independence all the way up to now, the government has always insisted that our population is not enough to sustain our economy. That is why we sought a hinterland in Malaysia, for example. What exactly has changed that made him so confident that just by injecting some stimulus, we are able to actually sustain our economy just on local consumption? Could he explain the changes that has taken place so far?
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for his question, and I believe that he has a good understanding of the situation in which we face and the reasons for prudence, and it is on this issue that I would be able to count on him on measures in which that we are employing to ensure that our welfare system will be sustainable. On the issue of consumption itself, the decrease in GST is only an initial stimulus. The main bulk of how are we going to increase opportunities going to SME will have to come from increasing wages, which is the ongoing commitment of the government, as well as from the endogenous growth that we are trying to accomplish by injecting greater technology as well as providing more efficient techniques in which we can increase the skills of our workers so that they can demand a higher wage.
One final point of clarification. I believe Mr. Lauren E. Would you like to speak from where you are if you can, or would you like to take the microphone?
Okay, I would like to address the comment made by the Minister of Finance. He seems really confident that actually the inflation rate will rise slower than the rise in median income. Well, I can cite many examples from around the world, but from my understanding, there hasn't been a single instance whereby the median income rises higher than the rate of inflation. So in this case, right, it's always going to be the fact that actually things are going to get more expensive in the future, and this has seen in the spike of prices so far. Everything has increased, and our hawker center food once cost $2.50, now it's $3.50 or higher. And I also want to express the view on the SMEs. Multinational companies in Singapore are already so affluent, and they have the financial resources to back them out and price their goods cheaper, or make business models that are able to suit their needs. However, SMEs do not have these financial resources, and whatever financial resources that the government gives may not be sufficient for them to be able to fight and to be able to contest against the competition with these MNCs, because they are much more bigger, they have more experience, and they have much more financial capital. Thank you.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the member essentially raises 2 points of concerns that he has, and I'm grateful that he expresses them in the context of Singapore. Firstly, on the issue of wages, my colleague, the Minister of Manpower, has already published the figures that in the previous financial year, that our real income, which is the growth in income above inflation, has already achieved a 2.9% growth. Going forward in the future, what I assure the member is that in this current fiscal year, it is a difficult time for us to enact contractually monetary policies, and that is why we are not going to prioritize the fighting of inflation above the keeping of jobs. But in the future, when the economy starts to recover, rest assured that there will be contractionary monetary measures and that inflation rates would be brought down to a sustainable level. This central bank that we have has a track record of keeping inflation at 0.5 to 1.2% for a sustained number of years. It is because of the problems that we have in Europe that I've already explained in the ministerial statement that we are experiencing the inflation that we have now, and that it is because of all these issues that we have with regards to slowdown in global consumption that we have got to deal with unemployment first because of inflation. I understand the members' concern, and I would urge patience with this matter. On the second issue in which the member mentioned, on the issue of why are we so keen on supporting MNCs, I would like to assure him that we are not as keen in supporting MNCs as we are for SMEs. We welcome ideas. Firstly, I would like to thank him for agreeing with us in principle, and I would like to welcome him to come up with suggestions in which we can help SMEs further. As for the case of MNCs, in this supply bill itself, the only significant help that we are giving is in the jobs credit scheme, and the fundamental purpose of which is to allow them some income to sustain their operations should they run into trouble, but the priority of which is for them to prioritize providing employment to Singaporeans than to foreigners. And with this, it can be seen that it is clear that we are providing more assistance to SMEs in this current crisis than to MNCs. And let me remind the member that the jobs credit scheme itself is also something that is extended to the SMEs. And Mr. Speaker, it is in response to this that I would like to move that the bill be read a second time.
The bill the motion to have the bill read a second time has already been introduced and passed. We are already in the second reading of the supply bill. To that effect, the speaker's list proposed by the party whip has already been elapsed, and therefore there are now motions open from the floor. Are there any motions? At this rate, the speaker will propose that the House resolve itself to the Committee on the Supply Bill to discuss the supply bill in detail. Are there any such motions from the floor?
Motion that the Parliament be resolved itself to the Committee.
That is in order. We'll put this to a vote. That to the opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Very well, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We are now in a committee of the whole Parliament on the supply bill, otherwise known as the supply committee. Members may speak freely on the details of the supply bill. You may make references to any specific scheme, clause, or matter or content within the supply bill. At this point, are there any members wishing to speak?